Hello, happy Wednesday, and welcome to #WhyWeVote, an interview series where we highlight unique and diverse American stories, all in the hopes of encouraging you to turn out and vote. My name is Stark-Ennis, and I will be your series host. Now, we are 54 days away from the 2020 US presidential election in November, and with the DNC and the RNC already behind us, both campaigns are in full swing. We are also only 20 days away from the first presidential debate set to take place later this month in September in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, if you haven't registered to vote already, you have plenty of time to do so, and we've made it super easy for you. Just click the link on our bio and get that taken care of. Now, for our first ever interview, I sat down with Brandon Michael Nase. Brandon is a talented actor and musician based in New York City, but he's also the founder and executive director of Broadway for Racial Justice, a nonprofit fighting for racial justice and equity within the Broadway and theatrical community at large. He and I talked about his journey from Texas to Brooklyn, his love for music, and of course, his important work with BFRJ, and how he thinks Broadway can change for the better. So, stay safe, stay active, and enjoy the conversation. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing? I'm
good. I'm a little sleepy, but I'm good.
Same. Thank you for giving me an excuse to wake up and see the sunrise in Los Angeles.
Right. I didn't think about it until I was looking, and I was like, wow, it is 7 a.m. there. And I'm like, it's early.
Oh, don't worry. I mean, I like having an excuse to wake up early. I don't do it enough, admittedly. You're currently in Brooklyn right now, right?
Yes, I am.
My understanding is you're not from Brooklyn, though. You're from big old Texas.
Yes, I am from specifically West Texas. So I have this conversation a lot because I think people that live outside of or don't really know Texas, they maybe know the shape of Texas.
Yeah.
But where I'm from is right in the middle of the rectangle at the top.
Okay.
It's right in the middle. And so when I say to people that I'm from West Texas, they're like, but that's at the top. Wouldn't that be north? And I was like, honestly, my entire time growing up, I thought it was North Texas too. They never referred to it that way, but yeah. Middle of nowhere. There's not the nearest place is probably Dallas, which is 6 hours away.
God, I was born in Fort Worth, so close.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah. No, but you're living in Brooklyn, and I'm curious because I'm from a very different place than where I am currently, which is Los Angeles. What for you was it like growing up in Texas, and specifically, I guess, West Texas?
In the moment, nothing seemed necessarily off or weird because, you're socialized wherever you grow up to think that is how the world is everywhere, that's the standard, that what people do there, that's what people do everywhere. Mm-hmm. So I just tried to assimilate, to code shift, to change who I was, to fit into what the people around me wanted me to be. And when I say people around me, I namely mean white people. It's very cowboys, cowboy hats, boots, yeah. Cattle. If you wore anything designer, people looked at you like you're a weird. You wanted to wear North Face jackets, wear Chaco sandals. You just wanted to do whatever it was that you had to do to fit it, to not look different. And so then in hindsight, now I look back and I'm like, man, that place really messed me up.
Yeah.
You live so long and go so long not trying to be yourself, trying to be something other than who you are. And that takes a toll on you in ways that you don't understand until you have your breaking point. And you're like, wow, who actually am I?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was tough.
Yeah, until you have your breaking point or you make a leap to somewhere else that exposes you to a different way of life and a different standard of which to hold yourself to, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so how long were you in Texas, and what was your journey to New York City like? When did that happen?
I'm trying to do math in my head. I guess I was in Texas until I was about 24 or 25.
Okay.
But I graduated in my hometown, and then I lived in the Dallas area for 5 years, where I went to school for my undergrad. And so I was there for 5 years. So that's like a different environment as well. And especially my college town was kind of like everybody calls it like a smaller Austin, and everybody thinks of Austin as like the liberal side of Texas. So it was kind of like a weird, quirky town, and things were a little, and I went to a liberal arts school and I was a music major. So things kind of started to open up and I started seeing things a bit differently. And then I moved back to my hometown and taught. I was a public school teacher for a couple of years.
Oh, wow.
And got to see a completely different side of where I came from and the people that I knew, and a side that I didn't like that was really disturbing and hypocritical. And so then I was like, you know what? I actually want to pursue performing. I've always wanted to pursue performing. So I decided to go to grad school, and I auditioned at Oklahoma City University and NYU. Got into both and decided like, okay, let's go. We're going to New York.
Nice.
So like 7 years ago, came to New York, started grad school. And like from there on, it was just like I would get on the train and I was like, oh my gosh, like people that look like me, like I'm not the minority. Oh my gosh, people are speaking different languages. Like people have different culture. Like, and it wasn't like a shock. It was like, oh, this is amazing. Yeah. I just felt like I felt so at home immediately.
And I'm similar. I think when I moved, I went to college in Boston, which for me was the most diverse place I had ever been. Eventually made the transition to Los Angeles, and exactly the same sentiment, going on the bus or the train or just out to a bar and looking around and seeing people that were dressed like me and that looked like me. I didn't know how much I needed that.
Yeah.
But backtracking, talking about your draw to music, what I've heard you sing, you're phenomenal, and obviously your work in New York centers around that. So what inspired you to fall in love with music and I guess chase it professionally?
My family, everybody in my family is a musician in some way. My late grandfather played bass and guitar. Both of my late grandmothers were singers, like incredible singers. My mom was a singer. My uncle sings. My aunt sang and was a painter and sculptor, and like everybody in my family is creative, a creative of some sort, and most of them it circles around music. So music was always a part of my life. I can remember being like in the 4th grade and going to Houston to sing in like a club, a jazz club with my uncle's jazz band, just like this 4th grade kids singing Stevie Wonder on stage. So it was always, there was never like a question or like it just always was a thing. And so much so like whenever I was applying for college, it was like, okay, I'm going to major in music. It's a matter of like what area I want to go into as it pertains to music. So yeah, it was just always a thing. I've always had kind of a crazy ear. My mom was in a jazz choir at the community college, and I would like go to rehearsals with her, and like I would learn all the parts, and I would be like singing all the different parts in the car, and she'd be like, wow. So yeah, it was just always like kind of in me, and a thing that I always feel like I didn't really have a choice. It was like that or nothing. Yeah.
Excellent. And so obviously you ventured to New York City, home of Broadway, which brings me to, one of the bigger reasons I wanted to sit down and chat with you. You are the founder and the executive director for Broadway for Racial Justice, BFRJ. For those that are unfamiliar with that nonprofit, that organization, tell us a little bit about how that came to be and maybe why that came to be.
So it's something that I always had wanted to do, to create some sort of entity within the theater world that tries to center racial justice and equity for people of color, because it's something that didn't exist in the way that we are creating it to be. The theater industry touts itself as being this super inclusive, like a home for people who don't have a home, that kind of thing. And as I started my career and was looking around and seeing different things and witnessing the like immense racism in creative rooms, on stages, in audition rooms, and just like everywhere, it permeates into the foundation of this business. I was just constantly like in awe. And I would see other organizations within our theater community that were like working to uplift different sects of our community, whether it was the LGBTQ community, just seeing the way that other communities were treated, and the way that we were ultimately used for our talents, our gifts, our unique culture, and how it was being appropriated, and just like, yeah, we were being used, we were being treated horrifically. And I'd always kind of said things or dropped things like, well, we need this and we need this and we need this. And I think in my mind, I always been like, someday I'll do that. But I felt like I had to have like a bigger platform to be able to establish something. Mm-hmm. And so COVID hit, nobody's working. And then George Floyd was murdered, and it seemed like everybody all of a sudden saw that Black people were being murdered, while Black people were like, what? Like, yep. It's been happening, y'all. It's been happening. But I kind of was just like, okay. I looked around and still kind of nobody or no entity was speaking. And so I said, okay, it's time to go. And founded this organization on the tenets of a hotline in which people of color that are in theatrical settings can call in to report moments of racial trauma to another person of color, and this emergency assistance fund for BIPOC that can call in and or that can apply to receive assistance, whether it's like, I need to pay this bill, or I need help buying groceries, that kind of stuff. Ultimately, to create an organization that is in no way founded on structural racism, and that is in no way founded in service to white supremacy or operating out of service to white supremacy. BFRJ seeks to like go around those structures, and there's all this talk about like seat at the table, giving people of color a seat at the table. And I think BFRJ's outlook is more like, no. Should we invite you to our table, then you can have a seat at that table, because the problem, that's part of the problem. You've been doing these diversity hires and having a Black person at a table full of white people and thinking that that's a safe space for them to speak truth to you when it's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how it started. You know, I just felt like I saw the need for those things, and two conversations were kind of what gave me the idea. Like, we need this hotline and we need this fund. Two conversations that I had with actors about those things that were just like, I'm stuck in this situation. I'm working in this theater. These people are saying all these things about the protests. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't feel safe. And having a conversation with that actor saying like, just tell them to stop.
Yeah.
And that actor being like, wait, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And that spurred me on to be like, people need somebody to advocate for them, especially younger non-union actors. You know, they don't have the union
protection,
but that doesn't mean that they should be subject to racism.
Yeah. So, you know, I resonate with all of that. I think that's one of the reasons why we're sitting down together today to talk. I felt the need to speak, and for so long I've been waiting to be on a red carpet. I've been waiting to be on a talk show, and I will be there one day. I can't be silent today. I've got to speak today. Right. You know, I'm in Los Angeles. I work in Hollywood. We get a lot of media attention with everything, both good and bad. And with the bad, it's racism, it's sexism, it's all the isms that plague Hollywood. But not everyone is privy to those experiences. I wasn't until I started working professionally as an actor. And you touched upon some examples. What does that white supremacy and that racism, those racist tendencies and foundations, what do they look like for an actor or a person of talent that is of color on Broadway? Excuse me.
You know, I think that part of the problem is that people don't know what that looks like. And when I say people, I mean white people. So if you go to someone and you say, this experience happened and this was racist, their response is like, well, ultimately, maybe not saying this verbally, but you understand that it's like, well, they didn't say the N-word and they didn't say that they believe in slavery. So how is it racism?
Yeah.
When we have, you know, somebody comes up and touches a person's hair, or there is very obvious unfair treatment to you as a person of color, you are being treated extremely different than your white counterparts. You are being paid extremely different. you know, in my own personal circumstances, it was those things. Recently on a tour that I was on in 2019, I was on tour with Cats, and you know, I was lied to and said that I was being paid the same as a counterpart, and you know, come to find out I wasn't, and that was just a lie. Um, and you know, I brought things up that I felt, you know, I feel like these people are being treated differently than me because of the color of my skin. And what I find is that you kind of understand quickly if that's real or not based on the reaction. Because I think if it isn't real, the desire from those people that you've reported that to is, no, that is not what we want. Like, we want to make sure that you do not feel that way. So whatever we need to do to combat that appearance, whatever we need to do, we want to do. We want to work with you. We want you to feel safe. We want you to feel welcome, like a valued member of this cast. And it's almost never been that reaction. It has always been defensive. It has always been, that can't be. It has been from other non-Black people of color. Well, I'm a person of color, so there's no way I can be racist.
Yeah.
And so it plays out in so many different ways, these macroaggressions, these microaggressions, saying things that are just like culturally insensitive. And then whenever you as a person of color speak up about these things, especially when you speak up publicly, and that's what I tend to do, because I feel that there is a system that has been set up that is laid on white supremacy that says, like, well, you go to HR and you report this so that we can handle it in-house. And I do that. And then I'm always met with, well, we didn't find any racism in this situation, which is why then I tend to go a little more publicly. And then after that happens, to see the shift of not only the stage management, company management teams towards you, but also your fellow white castmates, that, like, you know, there's kind of the silence when you're walking down the hall in the theater, or the eyes, or like the, I don't want to like necessarily be associated with you because you're a part of the problem. You're making things awkward.
I can't joke with you.
Right. Yeah. So that's, it looks so many different ways, the way this racism plays out in the theater industry. And then there are ways that it's played out that you can plainly see. If you go to the We See You White American Theater Instagram, and you see these yearbooks with all of the rosters and the pictures of these executive board members at Lincoln Center, at Roundabout, at the Broadway League, and it's white faces.
Yeah.
The majority of them all white faces. And so you're like, oh, well, of course, that's why things are the way that they are.
Yeah, it looks like a corporate kind of face page of partners or executives. I come from a corporate background before I pursued acting. And yeah, you know, the people with power that have a seat at that, you know, metaphorical and literal table in our case are white. And so, you know, closing out our discussion with Broadway, what moving forward can Broadway do to elevate the voices of people like us and the work of people like us? What does Broadway need to change?
I think the majority of leadership truly needs to step aside. I think there's this idea that they can bring somebody on or bring somebody in. Like I've said, this idea of like giving them a seat at the table. And it's like, no. The amount of change that needs to happen right now, it's going to, obviously, if you look at the roster and you see all those white faces and you're like, it shouldn't look like that. So the solution isn't to put 2 Black people on a board of 50. That's not, no. If you have a board of 50, then you need to have 25 people of color, and you could have 25 white people. That's what it needs to look like. And I think personally, actually, even further than that, because if we're going to really correct the problems, we need to have a lot of different voices of color, because as we've also heard a lot, we are not a monolith, and we need to have different voices with different outlooks and different views and different cultural expression at those tables, telling people, making decisions. And ultimately, there needs to be gigantic checks and balances for these for these theater companies, for the Broadway League, for equity. They need to be held accountable in a very real way. And that word being held accountable, I think, has such a scary and negative connotation. And no, we hold our government accountable. We as Black people are holding people accountable right now by marching in the streets, by setting things on fire, saying, you're not going to kill us anymore. And so these executives, these white leaders, have got to open themselves up to accountability, and they have got to lay down their pride whenever they feel it welling up and like, oh, I feel attacked, I feel da 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 da. They really need to think about that feeling of being attacked and think about how that Black man feels in the street when somebody's knee is on their neck. They're being attacked. You're being held to a higher standard that you should have been held to the entire time you've been in this leadership position.
Yeah. And sometimes you can only imagine or try to connect so much. Sometimes, to your point, it does require getting up from your seat and having someone else that can truly and authentically live that experience sit in that seat. Representation sometimes has to be lived. And that brings me to, in our pre-interview, you had a quote that really resonated with me, and you just touched upon it a little bit. And if you don't mind, I'll read it now. You said, "This is the first time in my life that I have felt an election meant life or death for many." And obviously, this series is dedicated and is highlighting the reasons why we need to really be voting, and not only just casting our vote, doing things like this, elevating voices like ours. I think a few years ago, that quote might have sounded hyperbolic and exaggerative. We now know that that's not the case, literally. So walk me through that statement and what this upcoming election means for you within those more serious contexts.
Well, I think in 2016, people were saying that, but it didn't have any weight to me because I truly did not think for a second that Donald Trump was going to be our president at all.
Same.
Even the day of the election, it was not a possibility in my mind. And then it happened. But I think that statement, they're in need. It is what it is. People are literally dying in the streets. And for me, my perfect president would see what happened to George Floyd and would immediately get on a plane and go there and go into the street and march with the protesters, and would bring the Secret Service with him to de-escalate the police, to de-escalate these situations. That, in my mind, is what my perfect president would do. And so whatever we have to do to move forward to that is what we have to do. And so do I think that Joe Biden is going to go and stand in the street? No, but that's pushing forward further to that than Donald Trump is at the end of the day. And I think that's kind of what we have to think about is, I will be 100% transparent. I am not a Joe Biden fan. And I have been very critical of Kamala Harris. But I believe that people can change. So as it pertains to Kamala Harris, I have also done research in how has she moved forward from those mistakes that she made? What is she doing to change those things that she did? And I think that she actually is doing things. And so I just think it's such a tough time for us. I think we have to focus so much on the people, especially the people of color, who are not going to bend their moral compass to vote for Biden and Kamala because of things that they've done. And I think we have to talk to those people, because I was one of those people. I am one of those people. I'm going to vote for Biden because I know that with Biden comes Kamala and Elizabeth Warren and these other people who are going to push us further towards leadership that gets on a plane and goes to these places and de-escalates the police themselves.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where we're at as a country. We don't need a president who is going to sit in the Oval Office and address the nation. We need a president who is going to go and walk in the streets with us, and who is going to stand with us and stand beside the people. And I think that there's no question which candidate moves us more in that direction.
Correct. I agree with so much of that. I think, it goes back to your point within Broadway and obviously within America and our governmental system. We as the people, yes, will elect these leaders, but that's not where our job ends. The accountability that we need to hold them to is the real work. And to your point, no one's perfect. We clearly have seen leadership that's imperfect. We've seen better leadership than others, but we as a people need to be holding our elected officials across the board, or representatives in Broadway and Hollywood, in the White House, accountable for our representation, because that's what their job is.
Right.
And so talking to someone like you who is doing that on the ground in New York City with BFRJ, Broadway for Racial Justice, is inspiring. And, it's my hope that I can continue to talk with people like you and really highlight the effort that's put forth and behind, causes that matter, because they matter to much more than just ourselves.
And I do want to say that, I founded Broadway for Racial Justice and then very quickly assembled an incredible team that I still work with, a board of directors that functions in. Also, so much of what we do at BFRJ is just trying to flip everything on its head, and ultimately in doing that, make it what it should be. And so these board of directors aren't a bunch of people who have given a lot of money to sit on this board so that they can approve executive board salaries. These are majority BIPOC who are helping me lifting weights, who are helping me go into rooms, helping me speaking truth to power. So I'm very grateful to have like a team of people with me, standing beside me. I don't ever want to talk like, well, and what I did with BFRJ and what because this isn't a moment of like, I'm not trying to be a figurehead leader. I think that it's obvious that at times, as executive director, you have to do that, but you could ask my board, they're like, Brandon, just do it. But I always want to be like transparent in that I have an incredible team that is working with me, and I'm very grateful for all of them.
Yeah, it takes a collective effort to really make any kind of change. And so that's a phenomenal point. Well, in that, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with me. I want to thank Art Save the Vote for supporting us. And I wish you the best of luck with Broadway for Racial Justice and everything that comes through your life. We'll obviously stay in contact. Let me know if you need a mediocre baritone ever for anything over there. And best of luck to you. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much.
Of course.